guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be reacting to a video called 10 freedoms you have in Poland but not in America. Okay, well, I can think of maybe a few things, but I am going to reserve my judgment and just check this video out. So come join me and comment, like, and subscribe.
So some people will say that America is one of the freest countries in the world, but
yeah.
how true is that? Today we're going to talk about the 10 ways where Poland is actually freer than America.
I bet there's a lot.
Please tell me I'm not the only one that thinks tipping culture is absolutely ridiculous. It's gotten to the point where people who are working at cafes, self-serve yogurt shops, I'm doing all the work, but I still have to tip the person that's working behind the counter? That doesn't
That's why their salaries for you don't have to pay them.
Make any sense to me. And as you travel around the world, you realize this tipping thing is kind of crazy because it's not the responsibility of the consumers to pay the wage of the workers. That's the owner's job. Number 9, the freedom of consumer protections. Something that bugged me a little bit when I first arrived to Europe was like every time you go to a new website, they ask you for permission if they can get your information or cookies, and you have to accept or reject. And I'm like, this is getting tedious having to do this for every website. But then I realized in America, they don't even ask you. They just take your information away and they give it to other people. Is it just me? Or is it annoying how every single thing now requires you to make an account? Like, can I just enjoy it without having to make an account? I don't know who has my phone number, who has my email. I'm getting all these spam messages everywhere. It's crazy, right? Here in Europe, they have a lot of protections for that. Whoa.
Really?
So over time, I'm like, okay, you know, there are some EU rules that I think are beneficial to the consumer. Apparently, there's also this rule where you can return items after 14 days for whatever reason whatsoever. I'm not entirely sure how true that is, but it's nice that here they protect the consumer.
It's also in the law.
So the freedom to be able to raise independent kids. One of the most beautiful things about this country is when I'm on public transportation in the center of the city and I see kids that are 8 years old, 10 years old, traveling by themselves or with their friends without any adult supervision. This is one of the reasons why I really like public transportation as well, because it's accessible to everybody and it's connected to all over the city. You can pretty much do whatever you want. People are very connected to their family, but a level of independence, especially with the women, seems to be encouraged because Poland is so homogenous. Society watches over your kids for you to a certain extent. There are certain lines that won't be crossed in public, such as hitting a woman in public is definitely not encouraged here. I think men will stand up for that. When you're on,
I would assume that's frowned upon everywhere.
Public transportation, the young people, boys and girls, will give up their seat for older people, which I also find very beautiful. Safety is also very important here. If you compare the murder rate or just any rate, to be honest, whether it comes to theft, to sexual abuse, to violent crime, it's significantly less than it is in the US. America used to be like that too. When everybody's optimistic, the country is progressing forward, people are getting richer, there is no reason for people to commit crime.
Yes, exactly.
One of the big freedoms you have here in Poland is the ability to say what you want. When it comes to humor and just making jokes in general, there's a much higher tolerance for what you can say here as opposed to America, where everybody's trying to correct other people on what's offensive and what's not. I've heard that that's definitely changing now in America because people are getting really sick of this PC behavior. But I recently saw this video of a senator asking a doctor, can a biological man get pregnant?
Dr. Verma, I wasn't sure I understood your answer to Senator Moody a moment ago. Do you think that men can get pregnant?
And she refuses to answer still. And this is supposed to be a scientist.
I also think yes/no questions like this are a political tool.
I think the intention behind political
I can see where he was going.
But the way that it is enforced is very unrealistic. For example, like if you're in a group with a bunch of guys, we're going to be talking shit. We're going to be saying a bunch of effed up jokes, but that's how we bond. I'm pretty sick and tired of people
I think it's just all time and place. You need to be aware of where you are.
Policing me on what I can or cannot say, especially when it comes to making fun of my own race. There's this weird thing in America where people will get offended on my behalf, which I think is really, really weird. Whereas here, we're allowed to joke about ourselves, and I have a very diverse friend group. There are jokes everywhere, but in my opinion, when you're among friends, these are some of the funniest jokes that you can make. Right? So I don't think that you should muzzle people because it doesn't maybe sound nice to you. Here in Poland,
if you're not offended,
people have a dark sense of humor in a good way, so you're able to pretty much talk about whatever you want. And I love that. If you are thinking about moving to Poland, I highly recommend this for people who come from Polish families. If you're Asian, if you're American, especially if you're concerned Poland is an amazing place to live. If you guys are curious and are thinking about moving to Poland, I highly recommend setting a meeting with me here. Number 6, the freedom of not needing a car. This is one of the most annoying things about America in general. And yes, certain cities have good public transportation, but in general, America is a car-first society. So that means that when you move to America, number 1, you have to find a place to rent, but number 2, you also have to have a vehicle. Maintaining a vehicle is so expensive with all the fees that you have to pay just for the car itself, plus insurance, plus gas. And I didn't realize how much money I was saving until I left the US and I sold my car, and I'm like, yo, it's nice having a car, but is it worth all the headache and responsibility?
How much can I save?
Really. I also love that in Europe, you can pretty much use public transportation for everything. You can take trains or planes to go to other countries. You can use trains to pretty much get to any city here in Poland. They have a really good tram system. Here in Warsaw, they have a metro system as well. The public transport infrastructure in many places around the world is excellent. And I wish that America was like that, but unfortunately, it is not.
Probably won't be ever. Sorry, it just affects
Also,
life.
because Poland is a European country, there are a lot of work-life protections when it comes to, for example, maternity leave.
I'm going to assume
when it
more
comes
than in the
to
US.
unemployment, when it comes to ZUS, just the social security and the insurance that you get from the government is actually quite good, even though you have to pay into that. The fact that you don't have a lot of debt when you graduate university is a huge plus. I like Poland because it has a lot of capitalistic tendencies, but it borrows from Europe in a lot of ways, where there's a lot more protection focused on the worker instead of big corporations, even though here in Poland it is still quite capitalistic. You must take 14 consecutive days at the minimum of vacation, and you get 20 to 26 days paid mandatory leave, whereas in the US you have 0 days legally required. You get an average of 10 to 15 days, but often combines unpaid and paid sick leave. And Polish people actually use their vacation without guilt. I think Europeans in general are totally cool with using their vacation. Maternity leave here is quite generous, at least compared to America. I think America is probably like the worst place to raise a family because just there are no protections for mothers that want to go on maternity leave, but it seems that that's still somewhat encouraged here in Poland. One of the cool things I like about this country is that as a young person, if you're under 26, you do not have to pay income tax. So all the money that you get goes directly to your pocket. You graduate university with little debt or no debt, and you get 0 income tax until you're 26. Most things, if you're a student, are also half price. For example, public transportation tickets, even the trains going to other cities, public transportation for the metro or tram in the city, you get half price on all of it. It does seem heavily favored towards the youth and allowing the younger people to be able to make more money and keep their money. I think one of the most effed up parts of the US is how everybody is in debt. In credit card debt, in student loan debt. There are so many forms of debt in the US. It's absolutely crazy. I believe the average debt for the American citizen is around $30,000 to $40,000, if you can believe that. The biggest culprit is university and also healthcare. Americans were wealthier than many people around the world, but a lot of our economy is funded by debt. Is that really real wealth? A lot of my European friends are maybe poorer than some of my American friends, but almost none of them have student debt. Almost none of them have credit card debt. Maybe it's a consumer's culture.
How do you define poverty then?
How there are no rules, for example, in gambling when it comes to sports events. Every sports channel and sports events now promotes gambling so much, which I think is so ridiculous. Polish people are just not as materialist as Americans are. Yes, they are European, but they're like new Europeans, so they kind of have this mix of both Western and Eastern culture, which I love a lot. Now that I don't have any student loans or credit card debt, I feel so much happier and at peace, and I can't believe that the majority of Americans have to suffer through that for years, even after they graduate, right? It's kind of a scam if you think about it. So let's talk about gun violence for a second. I personally enjoy living in countries where the vast majority of the population does not have guns. I think it heavily decreases the murder rate. I am conservative in America, but I don't agree with the population having guns. It is a lot of power for the average person to hold. I think it gives a lot of Americans this God complex that nobody can tell me what to do because I have a gun backing me up. But if you live in a society where you have to defend yourself physically with fists, no weapons involved,
what would you need to defend
keeps
yourself?
a lot of people in check. I'm a Chinese guy. I'm not very tall. I'm fit. I can probably hold myself in a fight, but I am not going to be fighting these 6 feet Polish guys who look like they can beat me up.
Why are you thinking about fighting?
Throughout my life, I've always had to find ways to cooperate and handle conflicts peacefully without resorting to violence. If you're in a culture where
yes.
violence is a norm and everybody
what it
wants to
should
fight,
be.
or like in the US where it's super easy for people to get a gun and everybody has a mental illness nowadays for some reason, I would rather live in a country like Poland where
It's
things
safe.
are very safe. People
Yeah.
are actually allowed to have guns here. The amount of guns per population
But then-
is way lower than it is
Then
in the
how
US.
come they don't have a
Also,
lot
I
of
don't know
them?
if you guys feel this way,
Almost
but
not a problem.
if I were to send my kids to school in the US, there's always this fear in the back of your head that what if some school shooting happens? There were a couple
It's
of these
awful.
situations at my high school when I was growing up. Nothing really happened, but the police were called and
Yeah,
threats
but-
were made, and it was just this whole fiasco. Number 2,
Yeah, but it's just
freedom
you're-
from
the threat's
crippling
there.
medical debt. This is one of the biggest problems of the US. We have
Again with
very
the
good
debt.
healthcare quality wise, but when it comes to paying for it, pricing, everything is so confusing and extremely overpriced. It's another scam, in my opinion. Here in Poland, the public
kinda
health
agree.
care is not the best. However, they do have private insurance here. LuxMed, I think, is one of the big ones.
Is it
I
cheap?
believe it costs like a couple $100s a month, and this is for the top tier premium private insurance.
Incredible.
Also, if you were to pay out of pocket without insurance, things cost less or the same as the copay you would pay in the US, and medication in general
Oh,
here
that's
is just a
incredible.
lot cheaper. I think a lot of people in America are so scared of going to the doctor or having anything bad happen to them because
Yeah, because
the
this
bills
can
that come
happen to
in
you.
will just completely ruin people, from ambulance fees, hospital fees. There are so many stories about
You'll
that
be
online.
homeless.
In America, if an ambulance came to my house and I stepped in the ambulance just for 1 second, boom, you get charged $2,000, $3,000,
Yeah.
$5,000. It's just so
Call an Uber.
unclear in the US. This is something I think about a lot, especially as I get older. Now that I'm past 30 years old, health is a much higher priority.
That's very young.
Have to worry about your safety. I cannot tell you how much peace I feel being able to walk around in
Where
the
was
city
he
at
from?
any point during the day or nighttime and feel safe that nothing bad is going to happen to me. I think the worst extreme was when I was in Colombia, Latin America, and I was on edge all the time, even though I lived in one of the safest cities in
Really?
Colombia. Now I live in Warsaw. It's a capital city, and considering that it's a capital city, it's very safe and there's very low levels of crime here. Homogenous societies in general tend to be a lot safer, especially countries that have a proper winter. There is
funny
a
him
correlation
saying this
between
because
temperature
he's
and
Asian.
crime rates, actually, if you guys didn't know about it. But also, I
Primarily
believe
Western
Poland as a
countries.
country has this sense of doing what's right and what's wrong. They're very similar to a lot of Asian countries. We just have a societal standard for what's correct and what's not correct. Police officers here enforce the law, and I believe in general society does respect police officers.
Maybe
Whereas
that's-
in America, it's just
I think maybe that's what this is it. It's the police officers and law enforcement actually making things count because otherwise it's lawless land.
weird 50-50 split where there's a lot of people that are fighting against law enforcement in your own country and supporting people breaking the laws. I think one of the things that Asians and Poles have in common is a standard of cleanliness and order, but also an adherence to the rules, right? If somebody breaks
What
the
about
rules, they
rules?
should be
Okay.
arrested or jailed. And there's a pretty hard line on what's correct and what's not correct.
Sounds harsh,
Whereas
but
in
yeah,
America,
of
it
course,
feels
if
like
it's the
things
law.
are a lot more moldable. You should be able to say, hey, I don't want people coming into my country illegally, and I want the government to enforce our laws of our country. But saying that in America makes you a racist, makes you a Trump lover, makes you a Republican, all this BS. For me, the most important thing is not what feels good, but what actually works to help maintain a proper society. And I think safety and rule and order is the number one thing that you need to prioritize, because once you have that foundation of rule and order, then you can build everything on top of that. And a lot of people just have this weird disrespect for the police when they're just trying to do their job. Look, are there bad police officers out
I
there?
think, yeah,
100%.
this is where the
Are
problem
they the
stems from.
majority? Heck no. And it's
don't
really
know.
difficult to be a police officer. And this is why I have a tremendous amount of respect for law enforcement in general, because a lot of these guys are just trying to do their job. I'm not trying to justify bad police officers. I would rather live in a society that overall has a respect for law enforcement rather than trying to impede law enforcement from doing their job. Something to think about. And this is why if you have the means, I highly recommend living in other places. If you have Polish descent, so your parents or your grandparents are from Poland, you are able to come back to the country without problem. There's just some documentation that you have to do to prove that you're Polish. If you're a wealthy
Isn't it a
individual,
hassle?
I
But
highly
worth it?
recommend getting a second passport. There are a lot of countries around the world that offer citizenship by investment, by family, by real estate. For example, if you have an EU passport, you can stay in any European country without a
Yeah.
problem. I highly recommend working
probably
with my
the
friend
best-
Raphael,
the best passport
at the
to have.
Wealthy Expat. The world now is so crazy. We have no idea what's going to happen from year to year. So being able to
absolutely right.
have that flexibility and be able to move when you need to is very important. If you guys are interested in that and you have a high net worth, I highly recommend reaching out to him here.
how much money you would need to have. But I do agree with what he said about the whole, there's, in this modern world, there's just so many things that one thing can go, I don't, you think one country is thriving and it's wonderful, and then 5 years later it's, oh no, wait, I don't think it's that, you know, the things aren't going that well for them. So I really do think it's funny that, well, I don't know if it's funny, but I think it's interesting, the idea of countries just shifting so much. Maybe all throughout history that's been the case, and this is me realizing this now, that I really do think it's quite interesting, the whole concept of, you're just, a lot of people I think these days have very, I have to be flexible. Do I have a backup plan? Do I have a second option? Because I don't know, things can go wrong at any point, which I think speaks a lot about how divided I think society is, as in worldwide. I'm not speaking about any particular country. I just mean in general. I think it's a worldwide sentiment of people just going through their options, as in, well, I mean, I'm not moving tomorrow, but I like to have the option. The option is there for me to have a backup plan, just in case things go incredibly wrong. So it's really funny, and you never know. I think that's really one of the things. It's one of these, you know, these days you can think, oh, this country, incredible, amazing, I'm gonna move there. But then 10 years later, 10 years down the line, it's, oh my god, did I make a mistake? It's really funny that the whole thing, again, well, not funny for you, that's your case, but I think it's just funny. And also I think it speaks a lot to how not a country is actually going to be perfect, and every country, every territory is going to go through a really high, it's going to go through highs, it's also going to go through lows. There's I think not a flat line as in, oh, everything's super perfect all the time, or everything's super bad all the time. Things can really do change at any particular time period, at any particular time. So it's best to be prepared, but I think you have to keep in mind the whole thing of, you know, you actually never know. So I think it's just that it's a thing about, well, put your I don't know, put your eggs all in one basket, but kind of do put them on, because you're not constantly moving, or unless that's your lifestyle. I don't think you're constantly moving every 8 years or every 10 years, as in, you know what, I think things are wrong here. I think I'm going to move to another place. And I think you're just constantly sort of going through the world and going through a lot of countries, just because you never know, you never think of, you know what, I think things are going downhill here, so I think I have to move. I think, well, maybe there are some people where that's their lifestyle and good for them, but I think that's probably the majority of people do not want to settle here. Maybe you would move maybe a couple of times in your life, but I think moving to a different country is just a lot of things that you need to take into account. And I think ultimately leaving a life behind is that's not easy, and sometimes it's not really realistic, because either some people, they have their own, I don't know, a lot of different things, and a lot of people, I don't know, you're tied to one particular place because of whatever. So again, people have a bunch of different reasons that I don't think is that realistic. I think for the majority of people to just go and, I'm packing my bags and I'm moving every 5 years. I don't think that's the case, unless again you have a very particular set of circumstances. And not just that, but I think, I mean, that's for the logistics of it all. But I also think you need to have, I think, probably the right personality in order for this to be enjoyable, because I think most people would go, most people move a couple of times and that's it, because you know the hassle that it goes into moving. And again, it's not just, and again, the logistics of it all, that's a whole thing that makes enough people go, and the bureaucracy that it takes to move somewhere else is just, especially again, not in your own city, or your own country, I mean to a different country, is just a lot. So I think a lot of people will just go, I did this once or twice, I'm not doing this for a third time, because it's just a lot. And that's not, again, the right personality of, I actually enjoy, so I don't have any particular ties to one particular place, and I enjoy the process of going somewhere new and just experiencing everything and just settling. And I think it takes some time for you to actually feel at home after you move somewhere else. So I think some people actually do enjoy that. They really do enjoy. There's a sense of, I don't like that familiarity, or I enjoy the whole concept of creating that sort of bond with the place. But whatever, I do. But I really do think it's funny how everyone wants a backup plan these days. But as for the other things that he mentioned, I do think it was obviously has some interesting sort of perspective on a lot of things. But I do think one of the things that struck me was the gun situation, because he mentioned, no, a lot of people in Poland do really have guns. And I think it's that, okay, so what's the difference with the US? I think maybe they have more. Again, he also mentioned how different I think society is, as in their mentality. And I do really think that plays a huge part on how a country actually is. And I think that probably makes a big difference. And it's just something that it's really hard for me to understand, just because Poland has a different mentality from the United States, and I think that's probably why I'm having a hard time sort of grasping this. But it's really interesting to me because I thought previously, oh, probably no one owns guns, that's why they don't have a problem with this. But no, apparently no, it's not a problem, but people do own guns, which is okay. So how on earth are they tackling this? But I think maybe that's just the case. I think it's just a very it's a very American concept. I think it's a very the American concept of just, again, my freedom is just my freedom allows me to have this and do whatever I want to because it's in the Constitution. I think maybe that's where it stems from, and that's why other countries probably do not have to deal with this. So it's obviously a deeper kind of this situation because, again, it's just sort of very ingrained into people's minds. So I think that's why it's a little bit different to sort of see and actually take a look at the difference and see, hey, we should probably change things because it's becoming a huge problem. But I do agree, of course, it would be so nice to just don't have, give that safety, again, of just of not having the fear of something bad happening because people carry guns. And it's not just about people carrying guns, because I don't think that's particularly, well, it sort of is actually. It's a problem if anyone can get a gun, but I think it's also the idea of, like he said, people are kind of losing their minds. Some people there's just a lot of, people are a little crazy these days, and it's just a little bit of, oh my God, I'm not trying to look into a fight. People are just very, I don't know how to say this politely, are just very agitated. And I think people, maybe sometimes they need to take a breather, relax, chill. I think people these days are just very, they're just do not really, I don't know, it's just very reactive probably, instead of just thinking things through. But again, I think that's a problem in just the humans these days. I don't know if it's technology, social media, I have no idea. It's the internet that's making people go a little wild. So again, I'm happy to know Poland is really, it hasn't affected them. And also, I think it's a good thing about the police situation and law enforcement. I think, like he said, yeah, of course, we've all seen, law enforcement. There's a whole debate of whether or not, policemen bad, and what's the alternative, right? It's a whole thing. And I know all countries are not created the same. Law enforcement doesn't work exactly the same in each particular place. I think this problem is also specific. Well, not specific to the United States. I do think other countries have the same problem as well. As in, of course, there are good cops. Not necessarily you see a cop and it's just, oh, bad cop. No, of course not. There's just some bad apples, of course. I think probably you would need to address that and see what's going on with that, and take a look at the system. And really just take a look at the system and see what's happening here and figure out the root of the problem. But I think it's something that he mentioned, which I think is, well, that's how you would think it should be, right? Yeah, I think the basis for probably a well-functioning society is for law. Someone has to be, someone has to make sure the rules are abided, because again, we live in a society, whether we like it or not. And it's, we have to live amongst other people. We have to live among other humans. And there are certain rules that we have to follow, because again, we don't live in a capsule, in an island, anywhere, somewhere isolated from everyone else. So even though, maybe you don't like it, there are certain rules and certain things that you have to follow. And of course, I think, if the law is sort of aiding and abetting, well, that's bad, of course. No, you need to actually make sure rules are being respected. And if there's a rule, well, I think that's where it's a whole thing, because some laws are just useless, or you would think, this is outdated, this doesn't work anymore. And again, that's the thing about laws as well. Yeah, technically, and maybe that's why you go to, if you're being judged in a court of law, maybe that's where the judge comes in, and maybe other people come in waiting and say, no, you know what, you're not guilty. But usually, I am speaking very broadly. I think, yeah, of course, you need law enforcement to actually make sure that the rules are actually being respected. Because of course, if you don't really have that, and everyone's sort of, oh yeah, we're not respecting the law, there's no law for us, there's no anything, well, that's where you get a lawless society, and that's not really a good thing. It's not the Wild West. We should all be mindful and respectful of each other. We don't want to harm anyone or anywhere else. Well, not anywhere, just anyone, or just, I don't know, the place that you're vandalizing the place where you live, so your own city and stuff, and obviously private property. But I do really agree with that. Of course, and I think maybe the U.S. should definitely, I don't know, just take a look at the whole law enforcement system and see, let's check what's actually the problem and what exactly is going wrong to actually have, because again, it's like so many things. It's an actual problem in the U.S. I don't know if other countries have this as well. I know that some countries do. I don't know if Poland has it. Apparently not. But yeah, let's take a look and see, what's going on here. Which, everything should be up for debate. I don't think any country is above sort of that law or against improvement. I think we should all, strive to be something better, and that's really, again, it's not a bad thing to sort of check and see, let's check this out, let's get some feedback. Is everything going properly? Let's take a look back and see if this is working for us or it is not working. If it's not working, well, let's see how we can improve this, and if it's working, great, let's continue to do so. But I think more countries should be sort of held accountable, including the US, and instead of just, I don't know, just changing things or just going, I don't know, because I think that's probably the solution. It's just, let's take a look and see exactly what's the problem. But yeah, Poland sounds like a really nice place to live, and I do agree that probably they do have more freedoms than the U.S. I think, and don't even get me started on the debt situation, and with both education and apparently obviously medical debt as well. Yeah, of course, that really takes a huge burden out of your shoulders. And like he said, if you have really good healthcare, or if it's cheaper, or just, again, if it's affordable and you're not super scared of going into debt because, you're scared of getting, in an accident or some sort of disease or something. It's, again, that's already freedom in and out of itself. I'm not talking freedom as in, I can just get out of the street. No, it's just about the whole freedom of being able to live. Like he said, they may be poorer, but if they're poorer, then how come they're debt free and they live, I think, probably just freer lives? I think if you're tied to the whole debt situation and you're constantly carrying that weight upon your shoulders as in, I owe so much money, then that's not what freedom means, and probably that's not being rich. So it's really funny that he mentioned, people in Poland, they can say, people, I think probably people in the US can say, people in Poland, we are richer than them. But it's okay, if you're richer, then how come they're living sort of freer lives? Which, good thinking, a little food for thought. But yeah, that was it for today, and I'll see you next time. Bye!